Welcome back. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico. There was a couple of issues that popped up this week and made headlines, in fact, this week that has to do with Mexican Airlines, aeronautical law, and of course, Mexico's new airport, or the Mexico's urban area, new airport known in Spanish as AIFA, Felipe Ángeles. And I just want to follow up on some of these issues. One of them may have a major impact on the future of Mexico's airlines. And I wanted to follow up some of these issues with our expert who's joining us again, Rodrigo Soto. He's an expert on Mexico and international law, aeronautical law. And of course, we have to follow up, Rodrigo, on what happened finally this week. The president did sign it's a presidential order in which basically establishes that no more cargo companies can no longer use Mexico City's international airport, Benito Juarez. All of them will now have to be using the Felipe Ángeles, the new airport, known also as AIFA, in the next 100 days. And of course, there's been complaints, but at least as we're doing this recording, there hasn't been major or very public complaints taking place right now. And it seems that either they do it or they figure out a way to fly out of the this new airport, or they're basically not going to be able to fly cargo. So what is the status? What are you hearing from these companies? Will they be able to fulfill this deadline? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ana Maria. It's a pleasure to having this opportunity with you and your audience. Well, the major complaint is related the period of time. The time is not long enough in order to do all the provisions in order to move out from Aeropuerto Internacional de la Ciudad de México. So the authority, the Civil Aviation Authority, has all the faculties and capabilities in order to give an order based in security and safety issues, because the operational security is very important in aviation. There's a reference previous in the past. It was executive order also commanding all the business aviation move out from Aeropuerto Internacional de la Ciudad de México to Aeropuerto Internacional de Toluca. So this issue was in 1994, and right now we are follow the same criteria. That means saturation or crowded operations. So they have to take this decision regarding or taking as a reference security, operational security or safety issues as a reference. So, but they need enough time to do it and to do it well. And they are not forced in order to go to the AIFA. They can leave the Aeropuerto Internacional de la Ciudad de México to another airport. Each company has to do its assessment in order their business goals or objectives in order to decide what airport works for them.
So they could go to Querétaro, they could go to the airport in Toluca. And why would they go to those airports? Because there's more infrastructure?
Yeah, could be, or maybe because location. I mean, some of cargo companies or air carriers focus in cargo, also are connected in a supply chain or international or national companies of, you know, like FedEx, UPS, Estafeta Mexicana, that only do cargo. So they have a complex logistics in the field. So the last mile service is very important. So the AIFA maybe is not the answer for a business model focusing in last mile service for delivering some, I don't know, mail, some, products like traveling like Amazon for last consumer delivery. So it's important to know what kind of service or business model each company has. and what they are looking for in order to not only to survive, to keep the good quality of the service. That's why
So,
they had to assess.
so as we speak, all these cargo companies, FedEx, DHL, I mean, all of them are in one way or the other having to try to make, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to be able to move out with their personnel and their offices, everything that
Exactly.
makes them function out of the Benito Juarez International Airport to some other airport. So we will soon, I guess, get a sense as to what's going to happen or how many of these companies are going to go to the AIFA, to the Felipe Angeles. Let me ask you about the other bit of news that we've been following closely, and it has to do with legislation that is being debated or will be debated in Congress, and has to do with this concept of, I'm going to say it in Spanish, cabotaje. Can you explain to our audience what this means?
Yeah, it's going from a point A to a point B in a domestic territory. I mean, in a national, the same national territory. So, for instance, if you're going to fly from León, Guanajuato to Monterrey, Nuevo León, the León, Guanajuato is the point A, and Monterrey, Nuevo León, the point B. Both are inside Mexico. But the cabotage implies that a foreign carrier, a foreign operator, can come from outside, from US, for instance, or from Guatemala, for instance, and deliver passengers, cargo, and mail in one of these points, and take new passengers, new cargo, and new mail, and move into another national point inside the Mexican territory. And that's why it's a very complex issue, because has some of the national operators consider that can be a threat for the Mexican market, or the supervision of the Mexican operators, the crews. I mean, the pilots and the co-pilots of first officers has showing a very wild, loud resistance and advocacy against this idea. But in the case of the legislation and the project of the legislation, is not an open cabotage. It's a very limited cabotage. I mean, it has to be only for some routes, not all the Mexican territory, specific routes, and those routes that has not enough connectivity. I mean, very few flights per week, or very few flights per day, and that are in need to have more flights in a very reasonable prices, because the airlines has going on a lot with the prices.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Well, it's very expensive, and the taxes that you have to pay is very expensive. In fact, many times, even though there can be a sale of by an airline trying to encourage people to fly with them, you end up paying more taxes than what the flight costs. Well, let me ask you this. There's kind of a sense that the reason why the president is proposing this legislation is a way to force Mexican airlines to use the AIFA airport, and that there continues to be a rejection of the use of this airport. So let me ask you this: is the cabotaje legislation, does it have to do with this? And why aren't more Mexican airlines using the AIFA airport?
Well, in my personal point of view, and according with some conversations with some players in the sector, the main issues exactly is to try to foster, to promote the AIFA in order to increase its operations. But at the end of the way, the main problem of the AIFA regarding Mexico City is the landing connectivity. I mean, all the land ways and roads or infrastructure focused to make more accessible or more viable in a reasonable period of time to arrive to the airport are not finished. The problem here was they finished the airport before they finished the roads in order to get in a short period of time to get there. So, Mexico City has a big traffic problem and have a lot of lack of infrastructure in order to achieve this advance of this arriving to the airport on time. So, but the infrastructure is very well done. And I think it's able to work, but you cannot right now to force the people to move in this specific airport. And we are lack a aviation policy, a national aviation policy. As a country, we don't have a plan for the next 30 or 50 years. That's why it's important to have a national aviation policy and with all the actors and factors involved to do it and to keep it. Even the central government has changed each 6 years. And that's why we are having this kind of problems, because we lack a vision and we lack some critical objectives shared with all the players on the industry. So it's important. And this cabotage has to do with this.
So one last question. We're literally running out of time, and I appreciate you joining us today. So the Felipe Angeles Airport will eventually be a fully functional airport once the connectivity to this airport is resolved?
Well, in my perspective, we need one thing more to shut down completely the ICM, because the problem are not the airports. The problem is the airspace design. Because we have a limit in order of the density of the aircraft operating at the same time for taking off or to approach and landing operation in the Valle de Mexico. So that's why we need to design the airports starting from the sky, not starting from the land. And that was a huge mistake. In the Texcoco Airport project, it was included the complete shutdown of the ICM. So if we want a full functional big airport in the Mexico Valley, we need to shut down one of them.
One of them. And of course, the more functional one right now, the one that can take most flights, is the old Mexico City Airport.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Exactly. What a dilemma. I always appreciate talking to you, Rodrigo Soto. He's a lawyer. He's been joining us, trying to explain something that we very rarely talk about in this show or even in the news, which is kind of the impact of all this legislation and the impact of these new airports on Mexico's economy. And I really appreciate it. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this legislation that's being proposed by President Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Rodrigo Soto. And we're going to go to another commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico.